And I believe that third culture kids with globalization and an increase in the expatriate community are the future. In 1960, there were 73 million expats. As of 2013, there were 230 million. This ever-growing number means that there's also a growing number of third culture kids. In a few years' time, you will not feel the need to ask the question, where are you from? Because if someone's response could last a lifetime, but more importantly, it won't really matter. It is valid to be curious about someone's background, especially in an international community such as our own. However, the phrasing of the question is based on the assumption that your family is geographically homogeneous, or that they've lived in the same country for their whole life. I am not from one location, which is what the question implies. And with a growing number of kids like you and me, this proves to be an issue. People say they ask the question, where are you from, because it's an automatic way to start a conversation with someone. Justifications include that it's safe, straightforward, and everyone is from somewhere. Well, I hate to break it to you, buddy, but it's not always straightforward. Expressing an interest in someone's background is one thing, but it's very important to proceed with caution, because I know that whenever someone asks me where I'm from, I simultaneously cry and sigh internally. The definition I read out to you earlier still makes it difficult for me to explain my situation. I am not only a third culture kid in the sense that I have spent the majority of my formative years outside my parents' culture, but I'm also from a multicultural family. You see, my mother is Korean-American, went through the French school system, and has lived in Paris, US, Korea, and moved back to the US by the time she was 16, making her a third culture kid. My father is English, but his grandparents were immigrants from Russia and Poland, so he doesn't necessarily look like your typical English guy. And my sisters are from Cambodia. So already we're a pretty diverse group, and as you can imagine, the combination of my parents made for some pretty interesting looking kids. Additionally, I was born in Vietnam. I've lived in Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, briefly in England, and moved back to Cambodia by the time I was 16. So it's pretty hard to explain all of that in 30 seconds. When people have guessed where I'm from, I've gotten responses ranging from Mexico to India and a few places in between. All were very interesting, but none were correct. But the fact that I'm part Korean really tends to throw some people off. It leads to questions such as, can you speak Korean? And when I respond with, unfortunately no, I get comments like, then you're not really Korean, and if you've never lived there, can you be from there? Questions and comments like these are challenging to answer because I have more extended family in Korea than I do America. I am closer to them than I am to my extended family in America. I spend more time with them than I do with my extended family in America. And yet, because I don't look Korean, I cannot identify as Korean. It also is very unsettling to me that people are very easy to accept that I'm American because of the way I sound and the fact that America is very diverse to begin with, even though I have no relations to my extended family there and I've never lived there, which is some of the comments that people make when I say that I'm Korean. I've never lived there, so I can't be Korean. Well, I've never lived in America, so under that logic, I couldn't be American, and yet that never seems to be an issue. At most international schools, including ISPP, there is an International Day, a day to celebrate diversity in our student body. ISPP is very relaxed and open-minded, so if you're from more than one country, you can go with more than one country in the parade. However, in past schools, such as in my school in Indonesia and Sri Lanka, you were forced to choose a country and walk with them under the flag. This caused issues internally because I wasn't ever really sure what country to represent. For most UN days, I walked with England, whilst my sisters walked with Cambodia. This raised a few eyebrows because I do not look English, and the fact that my sisters and I are related yet walk under different flags was a bit confusing. Also, it resulted in my mom breaking a very big sweat running around trying to get photos of everyone. Forcing a child from many countries to choose one to represent reinforces the idea that they do not necessarily belong. It can also be both challenging and confusing, which leads to my next point. A big issue that third culture kids face is the feeling of belonging nowhere. If I relate most to my Korean heritage, yet I'm consistently being told that I am not allowed to identify as Korean, where does that leave me? A child who's already having an identity crisis over the various cultures she's been exposed to is being told that the closest thing she has to a primary culture is not hers. So my advice to everyone is to just accept the answers people give you. If you ask someone where they're from and they say they're Korean, they're Korean. Don't argue. A big issue that even though being asked where you're from is often very tiresome, there are lots of positives to being a third culture kid and growing up and experiencing many different countries. To begin with, the level of exposure you have to different cultures and people is incredible. As I said earlier, I was born in Vietnam and I've lived in an additional 4 countries. I have friends who are Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Hindu. I grew up on kimchi, pho, beef lok lak, nasi goreng, roti, and smoked salmon and bagels. I've been exposed to the friendliness of strangers and how much that can affect your relationship with your surroundings. Walking down the little sandy road on Gili Trawangan, a small island off of Lombok in Indonesia, you would say hello and how do you do to everyone you meet, no matter what age, race, or gender, and even their mood. You are always guaranteed a positive response. It is by far one of the most relaxed and welcoming environments I've ever encountered, and I've always leave feeling rejuvenated and just incredibly happy. I tried taking that positivity and friendliness back with me to London. I don't know if many of you have had the pleasure of riding the London Underground, but if you do, here are a few tips. Number 1, avoid eye contact at all times, and don't smile. Because apparently, even if you're 15, 16, in jeans and a flowery top, these things lead to people thinking you're weird, threatening, and them shuffling away. Cultures vary from country to country, and moving around a lot has enabled me to experience different ones firsthand. Moving, and all the experiences that come with it, has also helped me with adjusting, which is why third culture kids are also referred to as cultural chameleons, a term coined by Ruth Van Calen and David Pollock. We are easily adaptable to new surroundings and customs, and this is incredibly useful, as even though we may not move countries as much as we get older, because we're pretty tired of that, we will be changing jobs and smaller environments. And it's very important to be easily adaptable, as it is an essential part in integrating smoothly and fitting in well. It also makes it very easy to make friends wherever you go. People's character are a function of their surroundings. And so by moving around to different countries, you get to meet different people. I don't know about you, but when I spend enough time with my friends, I start to pick up on their mannerisms. I was influenced by them, and they were influenced by their culture. The people you are surrounded by influence you, and they are influenced by their culture. Therefore, by being a third culture kid, your culture becomes a mashup of everywhere you've lived and everyone you've spent time with, and I think that's an incredibly beautiful thing. The third culture kid experience has both positives and negatives, but overall has a good impact on the children and their futures. Adult third culture kids seek ways to expose their children to the range of countries and cultures. This may be done by making their children third culture kids as well, and this would result in the growing number of third culture kids. Bringing cultures closer together and moving away from cultural divisions brings us one step closer to world peace, or as close as we could possibly get. My favorite saying in Bahasa Indonesia is Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which means unity in diversity. And even though that is incredibly important in any community, it is also important within ourselves. Being from anywhere is something to be proud of, so whether you are from one country or 5, accept the different cultures, embrace the different principles, and be your own culture and person. Your culture is constantly evolving. My culture in 5 years will not be what it is now, because it's a living thing that grows and gets richer and more complex. Ndela Faye said that being rootless doesn't mean I don't belong to any one place. It means that I choose to belong to many. So I think we should change the question. For the kids who choose to belong to many, instead of asking them where they're from, ask them where they've been, because I promise you their response will be a lot more exciting and much more worthwhile. Thank you.